Okay, back with Bruce Parkinson, of course, Purdue Hall of Fame member, good friend of the Smith family, but also father to Austin and Trent. Very proud of his boys. Austin, the women's basketball coach, I should say, at Butler, and they'll be playing in the Big East Championship. You're going to be going from Florida to New York, right? Right? Are they in New York? Is that where they? No, are they play Mohegan Sun?
Mohegan Sun, sir.
Yeah. Okay. You talk about, and Austin was certainly a cerebral basketball player, much cut out of your same cloth in terms of that. But, you look at Braden, and that we mentioned the last segment, just that desire, that high level of expectation, not only of yourself, but of your teammates, and trying to make sure you can raise all boats. And you had the same guy. You had a lot of you had talent around you as a player, but that fine line of leading, getting on their rear ends to make sure we as at Purdue is doing the things that you need to do. I sense your personalities are a little bit different between you and Braden, but Braden arguably maybe a little bit quieter. I don't know if that's fair. And I know Matt Painter's talked about that some, but just talk about that role of leadership and getting your guys in the right places, but also that mindset as Purdue turns the calendar to the rest of February, the Big Ten tournament, and then the NCAA tournament.
Well, I think from we share some of the same leadership, I guess, skills, talents, responsibilities. I don't know. And Alan, you followed this program even when you were a little kid, and I was around your mom and dad and family.
Yep.
The intensity level, I don't know of a person that is more committed and more intense than Braden.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't remember what game Dustin and I usually talk at halftime, and whatever the game was, it was a game he wasn't happy. Braden wasn't happy with. It was 3 or 4 games ago before this 4-game streak started. And Braden felt like he needed to have his dad come over and shoot with him, and just look at his shot and stuff. And one game, after the day of the game, he was in a gym at 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
Braden was.
They can't get him out of it. That's
right. So you know that better.
Yeah.
You're closer to that, and I just hear tidbits every once in a while. So his intensity level, and because of that, and his commitment level, is similar not only to developing his own game, but to Purdue and winning. And so I've got to believe that during this stretch, and when he's looking around and he's not seeing a level of commitment that he personally is used to, I suspect that's might be some tougher conversations every once in a while in the locker room, and even probably with the coaches. But whereas before, when you first come in as a freshman or sophomore, even though you're the leader on the team with the ball in your hand, starting with it, but Kendrick and Garrett, they were when I first came, and then you kind of earn you're the guy, as you said earlier at the very beginning, he's leading now on defense and offense. And there's no question he has 2 other great leaders with him, with Trey and Fletcher, but it's that threesome. And so it's always bouncing personalities. And like you said early on, you add these other things to the equation, social media, NIL, and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then you add, I don't know how many coaches of basketball that Matt has and Izzo has, but I mean, you look over there and it's like the number of coaches that football teams have now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so and all of the data analytics that are available that would say that I don't know. Fletcher gets most of his jump shots on the right side, either next to the baseline or when he's going to drive. And so now they're all planning for that.
Yeah.
This is hard. I mean,
they're scouted
hard. And now add those 4 teams and the next 3 teams that you talked about coming up. Not one of those is going to be an easy one. And so I bet they've had this couldn't have come a better time to have a little bit more time. I bet there's been some heart to hearts with Matt and those three. And I bet, and probably with, as a team, those leaders, those three, they're probably talking in the locker room amongst themselves a lot. And so it will be very interesting because, Cronin's a really good coach, and UCLA has kind of gotten used to seems like they're finding their stride. And
yes,
so thank goodness they've had a little more time, and they're having to play in Mackey. Michigan, when that Wolf kid played in Mackey for the first time, that's an intimidating place. And we're so fortunate and blessed that our crowd, the facility, and the loyalty of Boiler fans is just like none. It's incredible. And I'm telling you, you run out of that tunnel. I wish every Boiler fan had an opportunity to run out of that tunnel before the game with the fight song.
Yeah.
And then hear the crowd erupt. And I'm telling you, Alan, it's like you feel like you can jump up, even as a guard. I could jump up at the top of the square and jam one. It's incredible. And so we're going to have that in our favor, as we always do.
Yeah. All right. So, and you kind of hit it in the first segment. So win that record, and you're going to be in front of a television, and when that happens, what will go? And you've mentioned that nobody more perfect, especially with the close relationship you've had for all these years. But what will go through your head? I mean, in terms of that,
I'm going to be so proud of him.
Yeah.
He's family. I wanted someone. I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And probably a good time to talk about it, because I suspect Rick and Billy and some of the ones that played in the past. So I played in 112 games.
Yeah.
And Braden has played in 103 already. He's probably going to play in 140. After next year. The one thing I'm really happy about, and it was interesting watching Izzo and them talking about him taking over Knight's record.
Yeah.
When you think of like Billy and Rick and others in the past, Big Dog, and gosh, there's so many others. One thing you do really have to look at is the number of games. And the one thing that I am so happy about, that's not a discussion with Braden, because he's averaging more assists in more games than I did. And then to have our personal relationship, I could not be happier. And to be included, and I said this to somebody the other day, I didn't even know of the record that it was on the TV that had that shot of Braden and I side by side.
Yeah.
And it was over 1,000 points, over 500 assists, and 400 rebounds. I didn't even know that was a record, and that was mine, that I had that. And think of what that picture is going to look like when Braden gets done.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and then him thinking back like me, 48 years after the record, and thinking, well, they have to play a lot of minutes. They have to start every game, and they better be really, really good, because he's going to put that context out there for a point guard that I can't imagine it's ever going to be broken.
Yeah, it's funny. They can sort, as I said, with all the numbers now in these quote unquote records, and I'm not making fun of them at all, but they can sort anything now, because the databases have got stuff, and you can. And Braden Smith, what was he the first to do? The assist, points, and rebounds. There's only two guys since all the data has been there. And of course, these, like you said, 75 is kind of where it started, because your steals aren't recorded. Even before your time, not all that long before you, they weren't keeping assists, or weren't putting assists in the box score. So it is a remarkable thing. And I think when you put him in the context of Magic Johnson and others in the Big Ten,
Jason
and he
Kidd.
belongs, Jason Kidd, that makes it all the more unique. All right, we could talk about Braden all day long, and I appreciate your willingness to do so. I do think our viewers and readers, et cetera, need to know a little more about Bruce Parkinson and the time you played. an interesting time. Obviously, Coach Fred Schaus, you were recruited to Purdue by George King, and of course, our mutual friend Bob King, the late Bob King, that meant so much to Purdue basketball for so long. But talk about, you were the first year that freshmen were eligible. I mean, you come in from Yorktown, and I think it was Tennessee, Purdue. I know your dad played at Kentucky, right?
All-American.
And was a great player there in 1947, I want to say, if my memory is right.
Close, 46.
46. And my point is, you had a lot on your shoulders in a time where Mackey Arena and Purdue had expectations. It was just after the Mount era. And this is a program that had already developed at a very, very high level. And you get in there and you start as a freshman. What was that like, trying to convince some of your, John Garrett, Frank Kendrick were all older than you. You had other guys that you had to beat out to take that position. But what was that experience like for you?
Frankly, Alan, thinking of coming to Purdue, my dad had gone to Kentucky, and like he was an All-American his junior year. Then he had to go to service. And so me deciding between, coming to Purdue as Purdue versus Tennessee, but it was never with one thought that I would ever start as a freshman, even though that was the first year they were eligible. I had two people, one, my high school coach, which I was absolutely, Don Rogers, I was blessed with. And he always told me, Bruce, if you can pass and play defense, you could play anywhere at any level. And so that was always my mindset as a player. And then a guy that played at Purdue was the high school coach for Don Rogers, a guy named Dan Thornburg, played at Muncie Central, won a state tournament. He was my high school history teacher as well as the coach before I got into high school. And he told me before, in the summer before my freshman year in high school, in the summer before my going to Purdue, he says, Parkinson, what are your goals for next year? And this was the discussion before my freshman year in high school. And I said, well, I'd like to start on the JV team and then be a starter in sophomore and junior year in high school. And he looked at me like I was as dumb as a box of rocks. And he said, you can start as a freshman, Bruce. And I never had, I had so much respect for Mr. Thornburg that whatever he said, I would have believed. And as it turned out, I ended up starting. And so flash forward 4 years later, it's in August, right before I'm getting ready to head to Purdue. Mr. Thornburg used to run then, and I'd be down like I was many times at the park shooting by myself. He'd come over and talk. I wasn't scared of him then as I was before my freshman year in high school. He said, all right, Parkinson, what are your goals for? What are your goals for Purdue? And, he had played there. And I said, well, knowing who was ahead of me, I said, obviously I was thinking I was going to play on the freshman team, that I'd like to be third guard as a sophomore and start my junior and senior year. Because I had Gamoff, Rick Reisinger, Luke, Tom Gilbert. And he looked at me again like I was dumb as a box of rocks. And he said, didn't you learn anything from our last discussion? And he said, all the time that you put in, you can start there as a freshman. Now, both times I discounted that, but Thornburg said it twice. And so when we get to Purdue, it's not like now where everybody's in the locker room. You probably remember that
you were probably in that side locker room.
We were in that side locker room with the track and swimming guys, and it was we were put in some corner, Mike Steele, Brad McNulty, Robbie McCarter, and I. And it's the week before the season started, and I think I may have told you this story before, but week before and my practice gear is not my locker. And Mike and I and Robbie and Brad are there dressing. And I said, guys, my gear is not in here. And I said, Frank, who was the equipment manager then.
Frank and I,
Yeah, you remember him.
Oh, yeah.
I said, he is going to think that I stole my practice gear. And I said, so I'm going to go down and get it. I went down and with my head between my legs, and I said, Frank, I do not have any practice gear in my locker room. And he looked at me, well, of course you don't. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, your practice gear is in the varsity locker room. And I said, well, why is it there? he said, well, didn't they tell you? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I learned that I was going to move down to the varsity, to the main locker room from equipment manager 1 week before. Coaches hadn't said anything. And so even at that point, I wasn't thinking that I would be able to start. But Frank and John, they needed somebody to pass the ball. They didn't need somebody to come in and score. And so and I could defend. I mean, I always guard the best offensive player. And so it just, it just worked, Alan. But it was never with one thought. Whereas Braden, he comes in, looks around, and he is so confident in his abilities and skills. He clearly would have been thinking, I'm fighting for, I just expected I was probably going to be, they still had a freshman team.
Yeah.
And then, over the course of the fall, it felt like I might be able to play some, but it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, they spent all that time trying to find another point guard when Braden was coming in, because Braden came in with that injury and all that, and the rest is history. Yes, you did have some good guys, and you're always first to credit. It was a go-go basketball team, great team to watch during your tenure. John Garrett, of course, from Peru, Indiana, another small town guy, but a big time recruit. And of course, Frank Kendrick, who just passed away. Talk about those guys as players, and you can start with John, but then we talk about Frank as players, because John was a great scorer, but did a lot of things for this basketball program at Purdue that people forget how good he really was.
There's a video clip of some of the highlights of the NIT, and I hadn't seen that, and one showed John running the break. Yeah. And I had forgot John could score. He could score at
6'11",
6'11", and he could run the floor, and he was a really good shooter. Not, we weren't talking 3-point shooters then, but he could catch and shoot, and he was really smart. If he would have been a little bit more dedicated in terms of conditioning, he enjoyed himself. He was really, really good. Yeah. But I'm not sure how committed he was. He could have had a 10 to 12 year NBA career. He was so you start with him, and then you move to Frank, and I'm telling you, people had no idea. And of course, people now, you would have, but Frank was the real deal. I mean, he could score on anyone, and so we had two guys that were pro-like. And then you throw in Jerry Nichols and Bruce Rose, who were outstanding forwards, and they complemented each other really well. And then from Denny Gamoff to Dave Luke, it was that sophomore year team was a really, really strong team. And now, as we look back this season, where we are right now, that Ohio State game and that Penn State game, oh my gosh, it's just, at the time you think that's a fluke, but you don't think about like these last seven games who we're going to have to play. And we had one or two of those. I think Iowa was a game we shouldn't have lost.
112 to 111 over there, right?
Yeah, you always have those games. But I was blessed that and that's kind of, we're a portal missing somewhere in that 3-4 position. Yeah. And you said earlier, Alan, that this team's built probably for maybe even to be better next year. We have one or two pieces, and young kids. The kid from is it Brownsburg or Brownstown that's redshirting?
Yeah, Jack Benner.
Yeah. He's a nice player. I saw him play a little bit in high school, and of course the big kid that's redshirting.
Daniel Jacobson. Yeah.
But we need a junior or senior probably help at the 4 position. But from my playing days, we had a blend that George King, ultimately Coach Schaus, took over of some real nice compliments to each other.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, then you go out, then you get, after Frank and John graduated, and you guys go to the NIT. You ended up that season ranked number 11. You were really, and no disrespect to this team, certainly higher ranked than that team. This current team is now. You may and would have been probably a 3 seed at the most in the NCAA tournament in today's world, and would have been darn dangerous. I mean, you think about your 74 team. You had North Carolina State on the ropes at home. Long story on that game, but they win the national championship that year. Indiana, Michigan tie for the Big Ten championship, and of course, only one team went to the NCAA. Michigan goes instead of Indiana. But I have to ask you, because you had some unbelievable battles with Quinn Buckner in Indiana, and some great games that are in the history of Mackey Arena. Those games, the 73 game, your freshman year when you beat Indiana, your games after John and Frank were gone in 75 and in 77. They're just unreal battles with Indiana. But talk about that rivalry, and also facing Quinn Buckner, obviously another great point guard in the history of the league.
Yeah, he and Bobby Wilkerson probably to this day are the 2 best defensive guards that have ever played together. Yeah. I mean, you start with that.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anybody that would have knowledge of players back at that time to have watched today, but to have those 2 together and to play that IU team. Most people say that's that undefeated last team for them. The year I broke my wrist was. The best team in history,
Yeah.
And it was an honor then. I've remained friends with several of them, Kent Benson, John Laskowski, Abernathy, Tom Abernathy, and Quinn. Every once in a while I get to see him, Bobby Wilkerson every once in a while. But sometimes the definition of your legacy happens to be how do you play against these best teams. And fortunately, I'm done. I can look back now and think I had a really good game freshman year that we won. We got screwed at IU. Laz still knows we got screwed at IU the
74
year.
Yeah.
That might have been my best game. That particular year, I stole the ball to put us up 1, and then
a phantom call, right?
Phantom call that Coach Schaus chased. I can't remember, was Art White or one of them, the IU referees back then, and toward his locker room. And then of course I had the broken wrist that senior year when they won the national championship and were undefeated. The next year, we won by 18 in Assembly Hall. Kent Benson senior year, and then we won on national TV. It's one of those few national TV games.
Right. First time the NBC did, John Wooden did the game, right?
And Dick Enberg. It's my favorite picture of all of my sports pictures of being between Mr. Enberg and Mr. Wooden out on Mackey Arena floor and a whole bunch of people behind us. And I'd set the arena steals record that day with 7. And we won again. So I have some really good memories. Sometimes I wasn't worth a nickel against Wisconsin or Northwestern, which back then was the teams that were kind of toward the bottom of the conference. But I think that that group IU guys, they just brought the best out of us, and we had some great games.
All right, if you can stay with us. We're going to take a couple minute break and do one final segment with Bruce Parkinson. There's too much to talk about here, and we'll hit that. So stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple minutes in Gold and Black Live.